So, welcome back to the Grounded Ethos Podcast. This is episode 3, and if you have been aware or haven't been living under a rock, you have obviously noticed that we are not in our normal location. We are here on site at the infamous Camp McCall, and I'm Brayden Allen. I'm alongside my co-host Pastor Brian Spearman at Marietta First Baptist Church, which is about 20 minutes or about 20 to 45 minutes down the road from where we are at. And so, so Brian, we're here at Camp McCall, one of the places that we both would, especially you would consider one of the greatest places on earth.
Absolutely.
And so I guess to kind of start, being here at Camp McCall, what is this place?
Wow. Camp McCall is a boys camp that has been established since 1960. And so obviously we are in 2026. Mm-hmm. So it's been here for many, many years. Several 100,000 men and boys have walked to the chapel here at Camp McCall and made decisions. I'm one of them. I started coming to Camp McCall when I was in the first grade. And my dad, who was a pastor at a church called Double Springs Baptist Church down the road, brought me and 2 other guys that were in the first grade together. And we came up in my dad's Ford Ranger without air conditioning. So we rode in the back of the truck. That tells you how long ago it's been. And came up and I honestly have been here ever since. I don't think I've missed but one summer. And the only summer I have missed not being here since I was about 7 was my 10th grade summer. And that was because I was on so many mission trips and beach trips and things that I didn't get to come. But I made up for it in 11th grade. Right. And came in 11th grade as a counselor in training. Mm-hmm. And I also did backpacking trip, which the director here, Matt Spinner Allen, was actually my camp. He was my CHA director. He was the one that took us. Yeah, he took us on our backpacking trip, and so pretty cool stuff. Worked here 6 years. My brother worked here 6 years. My sister worked here. Married a former staffer. My dad was camp pastor for about 30 years. He was known as Rabbi. Well, I'm up here this week as a camp pastor, and so my oldest boy obviously worked up here for a couple summers, and so it's kind of a special place.
Oh yeah. Now you mentioned all the nicknames. Like I think it's really cool that all the staffers and the directors and the administrators all have nicknames, and yours is actually kind of one of the first ones I ever heard, and kind of talk about how that works and how they earn it, their nicknames. I just found it funny that your dad was Rabbi. But yeah, kind of talk about that and how that process works.
So the nicknames were way before me. They go back years and years and years. But basically, a first-year guy comes in and they have their government name, whatever their parents blessed them with as a child. And then when they get here, you have a staff orientation. And so all the vet staffers throughout staffer training basically find something either you do or something you've done or whatever, and you get a nickname. And that way, when campers come in, that's what your name is for the week. Mm-hmm. So my name has been Biscuit since 1995. And it's still Biscuit. Like when I'm out and, when I'm out and even in Colombia or when I've been down at the beach before, I've had people yell out across the beach, Biscuit. And I look and now I'm getting older. So sometimes it's a man with kids. He's like, you were my staffer. And I was like, good to know. Mm-hmm. And so it's been a tradition for Camp McCall for a long, long time. And so it's kind of cool. We've got a lot of records of all the different names of all the guys in the past.
I can't remember what you said. You've told it many times before, but what was Nate's, your oldest, nickname?
Nate's nickname was Rogue.
Rogue, that's right. I always thought it was something Star Wars related, and that's what made me think.
It's definitely Star Wars related, Rogue.
So, yeah, kind of talking about tradition, I guess one of the biggest things about Camp McCall and all kind of camps in general is we have Camp McCall here for the Royal Ambassadors, with the flags over there in the corner. And then like Camp Levita, where our girls at church are at that camp right now, for the GA's Girls in Action, kind of talk about the importance of camps like this, and I guess in a Christian sense, the importance of biblical mentorship and why camps like this are so important, especially for the younger age group kind of coming up from elementary school and even into like the youth age.
Absolutely. So, in South Carolina, as South Carolina Baptists, we have several camps. Camp McCall is one of them, and that is the boys' camp, boy and men camp. And so you basically can come to Camp McCall 1st through 12th grade. And so it's so important, I think, because Camp McCall is a place where not only can boys can come and they can learn adventure, they can learn about adversity, and they can learn about, just being with the Lord, not having a cell phone at every step of the way or having outside influences while they're here. But the biggest thing about camp is not only is it Camp McCall, not only is it important that the boys have some time with boys, but also it is a huge missions education camp. And so, our staff or the staff at camp have been going on mission trips for years, all over the world. Some of them went and served in the Olympics not long ago, in the Winter Olympics. I mean, when I worked on camp, I went to Boston and served for a week up there, and then I also served twice in Puerto Rico. And just most of the guys, we've gone on trips for years where camp staffers have gone with us at Marietta First Baptist.
They went with us. Some went to Clarkston with us, and New Orleans.
You name it. And so, but I think it's so crucial for a young man to be able to be with other young men and to be able to have time where you can talk through things, where you can, like tonight, for example, the high school boys, we have what's called Tough Questions. And the camp pastor and sometimes the camp missionary will come together with the high school boys and we let them ask us tough questions. That could be, about relationships, or it could be about, jobs, or it just could be about anything. It's really, someone will talk about maybe some problems they've got and like how they can handle that and things like that. I think it's so crucial that you do have some of those camps that are geared just for certain groups. And so our girls are at Camp Levita, which is the GA camp this week. And so it's important for them. It's a missions education camp as well. You have Century Kid and you have Somersault. You have several different camps that are offered, throughout South Carolina.
I was just thinking on the way over here too, like Look Up Lodge is right down the road too.
You've got so many other different camps that are around, but obviously me being around Camp McCall as much as I have, and as much as we've sent young ladies to Camp Levita, just that idea that they can learn about, missions.
Right.
To learn how, that they can be called even in first grade. I received a call to full-time ministry when I was in the 5th grade at Camp McCall. I know where I was.
Right.
I don't remember the preacher. I don't remember who preached. I just knew that God called me to do this full-time. And not that I ran from it, but God used education for me to do that first.
It's like the segue or pathway.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, it's one of those situations where I just think it's so crucial that we let our children, right? We let the children and our youth be able to experience camp, to experience being gone for a couple of days away from home. I remember coming just about every year, and so my boys, all three of them, have basically grown up at Camp McCall. The youngest one's here right now in the high school cabin. And so, but that idea, probably scripture-wise, when you look at like this week, our theme at Camp McCall is priority. And the theme verse for it is Matthew 6:33, talking about seek first the kingdom of God.
Right.
And all these things.
Make it a priority.
Absolutely. Make that the priority, which I think is so interesting because it's right there in the heart of the Sermon on the Mount. Right. Where Jesus has just said, hey, listen, I'll tell you I'll give you the cure for anxiety. The cure for anxiety is, number one, realizing that I'm the one that's providing this for you. Before you even get to the seek first part, he says, hey, do the flowers have to provide food for themselves? Do the birds have to provide food for themselves? One of my favorite verses in basically 25 to 34 in Matthew 6 is where it says, can any one of you add one single second to your life or 1 minute to your life? And the fact is that we can't.
Right. I think that's really important, especially the more that I've thought about it lately, is like when people kind of what we talked about last week, of that questioning what is truth, and questioning, okay, what is the morality behind that truth? And it always gets back to this question, okay, what actual control do you have of your own life? And the ultimate answer is you have no control over your own life.
Absolutely the truth.
And the truth of the actual truth of the reality is that the only one who has the control over our lives is the one who is the giver of our life, which ultimately is God the Father, and of course in Christ the Son being this part of the Godhead. But like the verse you mentioned is, I think that kind of sums it up really, really well. It's like you literally cannot add another day to your life.
No, you can't. And your priority, if you seek the Lord in everything that you do, that last verse of 34, right after verse 33 in Matthew chapter 6, it's a verse that I literally probably would consider a daily verse for me. Mm-hmm. It says, do not worry about today. Tomorrow will have enough problems of its own. Right. In other words, don't worry about tomorrow. Today, it's got enough problems of its own. The Lord is in control of all of it. And so if we're living every day like Christ has called us to live, right? And as last Proverbs 3:5-6 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding. Acknowledge His ways, and your ways will be straight. Mm-hmm. It's just a totally different thing. It's contrary and totally against what the majority of society says that we should do.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of gets into some of the verses we have listed. I listed out a bunch of them. If you want to, we can kind of go through some of them. But like, for example, we start out with Proverbs 22:6, and look at that one.
Oh yeah, train a child in the way he should go, and mm-hmm. in the end, he will not turn from it.
Right.
You know, that whole idea of, just understanding. Like one of the things that I love about Camp McCall and I love about camps is the staff people that are working there.
Right.
So, talking to some of the guys, you can look at guys that worked back in the 90s with me or in the 80s before me, and through the 2000s. And you can look up there and there's a different set, a variation of a group of guys, between 33 and 40 different people.
Right.
But all of them bring something different to the table. They all bring something totally different. Me, lead music is definitely not what God called me to do. But there are different guys up there with different gifts. Right. That God has given them, and through, kind of that building of mentorship and that building of understanding, I'll be honest with you. Like I learned more here as a staffer, and I'm a huge higher education fan. Mm-hmm. I very much value higher education. But a lot of it's just practical. Right.
That's kind of one of the main purposes of this.
So train a child in the way you should go. Parents, it's the same thing. Parents can raise their children in godly homes, but that doesn't mean that their child is going to be godly. Right. But that doesn't mean that they have got anything else they have to hold their hat on. If they're doing everything through the Lord's power, they're training them in the ways of the Lord, then guess what? The Lord is saying there, hey, train them the way that God called you.
It's kind of like planting the seed.
No, of course it is. Absolutely. In every way, shape, and form.
And I guess, we probably don't have time to go through all of them, but like the next one is James 1:2-3. Mm-hmm. That one, James 1:2-3, Psalms 32:8, Romans 5:3-4, Hebrews 12:1, 1 Peter.
I love Hebrews 12:1.
Maybe you want to mention what it says.
Yeah, in Hebrews 12:1, basically, you've got a whole chapter 11, which goes through the heroes of the faith. Mm-hmm. Those Old Testament heroes, and the writer, who we don't really know who that is, but the writer has given these definite people that they would have understood. Right. Because they were writing to a group of people, the Hebrew Christians, who were ready to quit. And so they're like, hey, listen, don't forget. Like, the Lord's been with us since the very beginning. I mean, Hebrews quotes Old Testament more than any other New Testament book. It's alluding to Old Testament scripture more than any other book in the New Testament. In 12:1, it basically says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a large cloud of witnesses, mm-hmm. right? It not only says take off any sin that's keeping you from running the race. It says anything that hinders mm-hmm. you from running the race.
And I think what's so cool about that, we use that verse at church all the time, but I think if you apply that to this camp, specifically what goes on here, I think it's really cool to see how that verse kind of comes alive. Like running of the race, I think of like relay races. I think of like kind of events like you would have at some type of camp like this, but then remove the hindrance kind of part, like we've talked about before, like the fact that you're so far away out in the woods here, you don't have the distraction of cell phones. You don't have the distraction of the big metropolis down that is Greenville, or the surrounding cities or the surrounding area. You're so far up here in the neck of the woods, up on the state line between North and South Carolina, that you kind of putting that verse into practice.
Oh, 100%. And so when you look at, what has society told us? The busier we are, the better it is, the more money we make, the better it is. And a lot of times it's just, you've got to get away from all of that. You got to get away from these.
Right.
5 minutes just to say, you know what, Lord, I have absolutely nothing to worry about while I'm up here.
Mm-hmm.
Just this idea. And so that whole mentoring idea, the whole kind of being with other people and seeing that not everybody, everybody has struggles. Everybody's going through different things. One of the verses you've got down here is Proverbs 27:17.
Right.
Iron sharpens iron as one man sharpens another.
Right.
And, I can honestly say that I have got some of my best friends who I have worked with for years and still work with that work here.
Mm-hmm.
We've had a bond where we went to school together, Spinner was my staffer several times before, and then I worked with him for 2 years.
Yeah.
And then he went away for a long time, and then he's been back, and so, but I could say that for a lot of different guys, just that idea of, trying to be together, trying to work together so that we can face the things, especially that this world has to throw at us.
Absolutely. Yeah, and some of the other ones, like I'll just briefly mention them if anybody wants to go on and kind of read through them. Like 1 Peter, we mentioned Hebrews 12:1, 1 Peter 1, 6 through 7, Galatians 6:2, 1 Thessalonians 5:11, Hebrews 10:24 through 25, and of course you mentioned it, Brian, Proverbs 27:17. And so I guess kind of talking about that mentorship thing and why it's kind of how it's so important. Kind of before we get into this last part of kind of getting into what I would kind of describe as kind of an emerging, it's an issue that's been there since who knows how long, but before we get into that, kind of describe how mentorship, and you kind of already touched on it a little bit, but kind of through all the activities that happen here. I'm just looking at, we got the big gym right here, and the lakes right over the hill, and the drain pipe and all that kind of stuff from what I remember the last time I was here. But kind of talk about how that mentorship actually happens here at the camp.
So you've got several tiers to that situation. So you have an administration who have been here, and they've worked at camp for long periods of time. They kind of have that idea and that breakdown of different leadership. Now, the beauty of Camp McCall is the way it's structured, in my opinion, to work here. Okay, it doesn't really matter how old you are. Mm-hmm. If you come in as a first-year guy, you do everything. You clean the bathhouses. You wash dishes. You clean. When a child gets sick, when one gets up in the middle of the night and maybe has a nightmare, or you see one of them that's really homesick, or you're with the kids a lot more in that first year. The idea is like, for those guys that are above them, those veteran type staffers, what you've got is different tiers based on years experience, but also that mentorship. Like, for example, my second year on staff, I basically was over the store. Mm-hmm. Now, that was my job. I worked in the store every day, all day. I very rarely worked at the lake, or I very rarely worked anywhere else. I worked at the store. But through working at the store, I learned several things. I learned inventory. I learned how when guys came into work, like I had to make sure that the money was correct. You had to make sure that you were counting your shirts, all that different stuff. It was a lot more than just, selling t-shirts and selling hats. You had to count everything before, after. You had to make sure the money matched the t-shirts or matched the things. It's just like if you work anywhere else. But the thing about it is those guys are training the guys below them, right, to do those different things. And so the mentorship part, as far as the work portion, also leads into the spiritual portion.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I really do consider my years here on staff, and then really, to be honest with you, have been up here as many times as I have as camp pastor. The mentorship passed down from year to year to year, and those things, they go into the workplace,
Mm-hmm.
right? They go in if you're in school. They go in if you're having a trade or you've learned a trade or whatever. And to be honest with you, just being a decent human being to be able to get along with difficult people.
Right.
Because we're all difficult.
Right.
Right? So that idea of mentorship, especially in the way the staff works, but then with the children, like the students. When you get to that high school group, they'll have things, like I said, hard questions tonight. They're doing overnights. So they're going up and spending the night up in the shelters that were built. Each year you come back, there's different things that you have learned.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The big hike Wednesday. It's one of those things where some kids just dread it. They're like, oh my gosh, we got to go hike. But once they get to the top of the pinnacle of Indian Jump and they look at it, they're like, man, wow, that is incredible. Or they get down to Sugar Liquor and they're on a rock slide, sliding down, or they're at Reedy Cove and they see like the third largest waterfall in the state, or, the high school guys when they go to the gorge or wherever they go. Each year it kind of builds on that, so you kind of have something to give you a little bit more adversity the next year, and also the things build up through the whole thing. Well, it's the same thing from every other situation. Basically, that mentorship is passed down for generations. Like one of the things that I think, I know this is going to sound crazy, and I've said this many times, I loved cleaning the bathhouse as a first year guy.
Mm-hmm.
Because me and the other two guys did it every night together.
Mm-hmm.
So the bathhouse was broken up in 3 sections. You had showers, you had sinks, you had toilets.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, toilets were the worst night.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's just common sense. But we built a brotherhood. And each night, we were like, you know what, we can go in here and we can work for 2 hours by ourselves, or we can go in here for 45 minutes and really make sure this is done correctly.
Right.
Now, I will say this. The guys in which showed us how to do that showed us, hey, listen, you know what? It's important to get these seats clean.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't so you would go in there and clean toilets.
Right.
It was so that you could understand, hey, listen, there's a camper who's here for a week. And most people don't like using public restrooms. I'm not a huge public restroom user myself.
I don't think a whole lot of people are.
They're not, okay? And so back in those days, it would get pretty nasty. But if you didn't clean them, then it could lead to a kid having a really bad time at camp.
Right.
It doesn't seem like much, but mentoring somebody below you, for them to see, hey, listen, I would go in there sometimes with the guys and some of our other staff guys. We'd go in and help those guys, and we'd be like, hey, let me show you how to do this.
Right.
So that they had a standard.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing with mentorship, I think.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's so important about mentorship is it's not just all over the place. It's not just let's just do anything. There is a specific goal in mind, and there's a structure to it, but it's not a structure that's so overbearing that it's like you only can do this, or this. It's we need to have there's this challenge or goal, and here's how we best think we can achieve that goal. Learn through the process, kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what's so important. I'll argue that's what a lot of, especially young people my age and below, either never had or maybe had once, but not consistently, or just blatantly never had it.
Sure.
And I think that as time goes on, you see that more and more and more, especially nowadays. And that kind of leads into the final point we're going to talk about here is that you're seeing these types of things kind of, I guess you could say in a way, kind of rear their ugly head in a way. And one of those, you're beginning to see the rise of popular interest in socialism again. And if anybody watching who's older would know that it doesn't work. But you're beginning to see a rise in it. I think the lack of mentorship, or just the lack of sound teaching, or the lack of sound parenting, or whatever you want to call it, is to blame for that. And in a way, it's kind of taking the the needs that every human being has, and in a way leaving them to kind of manifest in a way that is not right.
God created us to glorify Him in everything.
Mm-hmm.
God created us to work.
Right.
He created us and created us in a way in which, number one, everything He's going to get glory through one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
But there has to be this idea that work is something that the Lord asks us to do. Like, we have been put here to work.
And I think that's what's so important about it, is what makes work tough isn't the work itself. Mm-hmm. What makes it tough is the fact we're doing it. And we're fallen human beings that want to go our own way, that want to do our own thing, that think we've got it all figured out no matter what we do. And I think that's the issue. And that really what that goes back to is what we said on the very first episode, is all the problems of the world stem back to Genesis 3.
They stem back to the fall of man. Right.
And since that moment, human beings have somehow, some way figured out the right way sucks, so I'm going to go my own way and think I can figure it out on myself. Ultimately, you end up falling flat on your face.
Or that everything that everybody does should be understood as truth.
Right, which that doesn't make sense either.
It doesn't. And so, listen, our country has a lot of things that are broken.
Mm-hmm.
But when you've traveled somewhere where basically a government is large enough and powerful enough to cut off basic needs
mm-hmm.
for individuals, it's a dangerous place to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when you look at the different things, I don't know, like for me, I really struggle because when I was in a foreign country, I'm not going to name the country, it doesn't really matter, the government decided when and how much water, clean water, people got.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when a village that we were working with, we had fallen in love with the people, when we knew that we could take just some good old American dollars and fix their well.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, hey, we can do this. And they're like, well, that's fine. But if the government decides that we fixed it, they will come and break it.
Mm-hmm.
And it will be fixed when they fix it.
Which is usually never.
Which is usually not going to happen anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, they had to revert to different processes and ways to get the water in there. And it seems like we brought vats of water in for the people and invited them to the church during that time. And people were bringing their buckets to the church and things like that.
I've always thought about this because I know exactly the place you're talking about because we talked about it all the time. But how does, in a situation like that, how does, I guess, the government respond to, say, mission groups or to Christian groups or to, because it's different in different countries, but
it's totally different in different countries.
But like specifically in the one you're mentioning, and there's plenty of others that we could talk about too, but specifically the one you're talking about, how do they approach mission groups?
Well, I'll be honest with you. It was a lot more open years ago. They have really drastically cut down on groups coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think they can bring, maybe, I might be wrong, 15 to 20 people into that specific ministry that we worked with at a time, where you used to could bring in 90 to 95.
Mm-hmm.
But over time, what has happened is they have really gotten very strict on who can come in the country and who can come out of the country. And not only that, what you can bring into the country and how much you can bring into the country.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when you look at different things, I mean, it goes back to it's a broken world.
Yeah, for sure. And that kind of gets to back to a worldview thing. Is that's ultimately what the idea of socialism. It comes back down to I think at the end of the day, and it's like we've said before, there's only two types of people, and there's those who know Jesus Christ and those who don't. And I think that sets up everything else that comes afterwards. It's those who know Jesus Christ will base their worldview on a relationship and a knowledge with the Lord. But those who don't will get into things where they believe they can set up their own truth, they can set up their own morality, and the application of one of those, I would argue, is Marxism, and that's ultimately where socialism kind of begins. And really what it is, and kind of from a just an ideological perspective or a history perspective, what it is it's this thought process that you can re-engineer the nature of human beings into something that it's not, and ultimately create a society where human beings act to in a coordinating or in a way that's together, that every biological or every behavioral study that I've ever read is just in complete contradiction to it.
Well, and you look at a lot of those leaders, and they ended up dying miserable people.
Right.
I mean, because they tried to find truth. Mm-hmm. And a large portion of that type of thought is basically there is not a God.
Right.
There is not a deity. There is not something that can provide peace, that we provide peace. Mm-hmm. That we ourselves are able to manufacture peace. And
right.
so, it's such a sad world in the fact of, like, and a lot of people will say, well, but everybody should have equal rights to all these different things. Listen, in a real Christian worldview, that would be terrific. Mm-hmm. If everybody truly did, what the early church would talk about in Acts 2:42, where they all shared all things in common. Talking about church,
right?
Sharing all things in common. That's not saying that everybody agreed. I mean, my goodness, they for sure did not agree with everything the Roman government was
absolutely
doing. And they didn't really agree with everything that was going on in the situations they were in. But that idea of all things in common, well, all things in common still have to have something that's in common. So for somebody to truly have a happiness or an understanding of peace, it has to come from the Lord.
Right, and I think
which is totally strikes in the face of what
man wants to do.
What a Karl Marx would want to do, or what any of the socialist founders or Marxist founders would find. It is more man power in place.
Really, what it is,
and man fixing the situation.
Right, and that's kind of what it is. Going back to Genesis 3, and I'll harp on it till the cows come home. It is a war against God. Ultimately it's a spiritual warfare thing. It is mankind in rebellion against God. That's at the foundational level. That's what it is. There ain't no other way to put it.
Well, and let's face it, the world is a broken place. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't really matter where you are. There are going to be constant world problems. Some of them would be down to just basic human needs.
Right.
Just that idea that, yes, as a Christian, what should we want? We should want, number one, people to come to know Christ.
Absolutely.
But through the blessings that God has given us, having a compassion and an understanding of nothing we have is ours anyway. Mm-hmm. So how do we together build a world in which we know that Christ is the answer? Right.
And speaking of that, some just kind of scripture to add on to that is the first one I think of is Matthew 16. That kind of chapter, and some of the other ones I have listed here, kind of is how I would approach a socialist or a Marxist kind of worldview from a Christian perspective. You can kind of mention some of those things of what it says, and we'll go from there.
So in Matthew 16, for example, the Pharisees and the Sadducees in verse 1 approached, and the test asked him to show them a sign from heaven. So many times, what do we find? Well, you have got the Pharisees, you got the Sadducees that are constantly trying to basically go against Christ. Mm-hmm. They're trying to test him. They're trying to see, what's going on. And he said, hey, when evening comes to you, it will be a good weather because the sky is red. And the morning today will be stormy because the sky is red and threatening. You know how to read the appearance of the sky, but you can't read the sign of the times. Mm-hmm. Okay? An evil and adulterous generation wants a sign, but no sign will be given except the sign of Jonah. Then he left them and went away. The disciples reached the other shore. They had forgotten to take bread. Jesus told them, watch out and beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees. And they discussed among themselves, we didn't bring any bread. Aware of this, Jesus said, you of little faith, why are you discussing among yourselves that you do not have bread? Don't you understand yet? Don't you remember the 5 loaves for the 5,000 and how many baskets you collected? Or the 7 loaves for the 4,000 and how many large baskets you collected? Why is it you don't understand that when I told you, beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees, it wasn't about bread? Then they understood that he did not tell them to be aware of the yeast and bread, but of the teaching of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. That idea of that you and I can do anything without him. I mean, the reason, the 5,000 men, not including women and children, of 20,000,
right?
Of a couple of loaves and a couple of fish there, the fact is Jesus was the one that kind of broke that up.
Right.
Same thing with the 4,000. So they had seen that, but he's like, look, I'm not telling you to beware of, I don't want you even thinking about the bread portion. What I want you to think about is the teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that is contrary to what we know as believers in Christ. It can look good. It can look pleasing. It can look promising. But without Christ, it's worthless.
Right. At least a dead end.
It's worthless.
Go ahead. The next kind of one we were going to talk about, and you kind of mentioned it in the last episode, and I thought it was kind of profound. And we even talked about it in Sunday school when you even preached on it a little bit on Sunday with some of the next chapters here, but starting out with Luke chapter 4 and the temptation. I thought one of the verses that kind of always stood out to me when it came to the idea of socialism is that, especially Marxism, is that it's based in a large way around materialism, that humanity's, I guess you could say, success or prospering or whatever is in materialism. And to me, that never really made sense, because if you look at it from understanding from a Christian worldview, that a human being is not just biological. They are body, mind, and soul. They are, those being body being biological, the mind being psychological, and the soul being philosophical and ultimately theological. And so because of that, it never really made sense for me how a human being could be defined by materialism alone. And that one of the verses that comes up in my mind is that in Luke chapter 4 is where Jesus is talking to the devil, and Jesus correctly says to the devil, man does not live on bread alone, and that ultimately our source of fulfillment in life does not come from creation, but rather the Creator.
Yes.
And so I guess you could kind of speak on that too.
Well, and all 3 times, what did Christ do? Every time he was tempted, he used Scripture,
Mm-hmm.
right? And Satan would come in with these ideas of either wealth, which he didn't have to offer,
Right.
Meeting the needs. Because, think about it. Jesus had been without food for a while, and so when you look at those situations, and then, so when you also go back to this whole idea behind, everybody should have all equal amounts of this, and it's physically, number one, not going to be possible.
Right.
Somebody in the end is going to gain power from having those types of things. But I think for me, the biggest thing with any type of a Marxist type thought, socialist type thought, the fact of the matter is we as Christians should want
Mm-hmm.
to help others.
Mm-hmm.
Plain and simple. We should want to be looking at others through the eyes of how can we use the material things the Lord has given us to share Christ.
Right, and I think society has that reversed.
Well, they do, because the whole idea behind a Karl Marx or any of those folks that come through that line of process, they are trying to find truth, but they do not believe that truth is grounded in anything outside of man.
Right.
They believe in every way, that God is dead. He's useless. He is just there kind of as a in their idea, a psychological, as you were mentioning earlier, a psychological thing to make people believe that, that there is actually a higher power, or that there is actually hope outside of what they can provide,
right,
or what the government can provide, or what they can take to provide.
I think that's important, is that and this is kind of one of the things that I use as kind of the evidence of God, is that when we don't fill that God-shaped hole with the Lord, we fill it with things that mimic the Lord, and ultimately they come from the devil, because that's what the devil does. He mimics. He takes whatever. I don't know if you've said this or somebody else has told me this, but he takes 99% of the truth and 1% off to make it look like it's truth, but in reality, it's complete deception.
Sure.
And it leads to destruction, decay, death, all those different things. And the next one I have listed here is Luke chapter 10, which is the story of the Good Samaritan. And I think one of the problems that I have with socialism, I think most Americans or anybody with, I'm going to kind of say it, just a common sense mindset, is the issue with socialism is not that it's bad in the sense of what it's trying to achieve. It's bad in the sense of how it goes about doing it, because of the fact it's in contradiction to how human beings operate.
It is. And it really takes God out of the situation.
Right.
Out of the scenario. I wholeheartedly agree that we should look out and be, as believers in Christ, we should want to be people who help meet the needs of others.
Right.
But when it comes to a point of where you're taking the whole Lord out of the entire situation, that is where it's really pointless.
Mm-hmm. And I think what's good too, and this kind of gets into Luke chapter 18 and the story of the rich young ruler too, is that the issue of socialism is the idea of voluntarism versus coercivism, or however you say it. And I think that's why people often say, like, they bring up the passages in Acts where it talks about redistribution inside the church and all that kind of stuff. But I think something that always kind of comes up when they mention that is like, where's the force involved in that socialism would bring about? And I'm like, it isn't there, because
no, it's not a forced thing.
Right, because if it's in order to have a holy God involved, there cannot be force, because it would not.
Right.
That would violate God's own nature, because God is holy in the sense that He is ultimate grace, ultimate mercy, and ultimate justice, and mankind can't do all those things together because they're not God. And in order for God to be God, He has to be all three. And when you take God out of the picture, as Marxism does, that's why it collapses.
Exactly.
And with Luke chapter 18, too, in the story of the rich young ruler, and I think this is kind of where one of the issues, especially nowadays, that people have, is the idea of, okay, they see all this wealth on TV or on social media or wherever they get it from, and they're in their mind thinking, okay, why can't I have that? And I think it's important to know that there's a difference between having a lot of money and worshiping a lot of money.
Absolutely.
And that's where I disagree with people saying that. People will misquote the Bible and say, oh, the Bible says you can't be wealthy. I'm like, no, it doesn't. It says that you're not to make the money your idol. And we talked about this, and I think we talked about this in Sunday school on Sunday, is that when you make money, the goal of gaining money, you're taking your eyes off of God, which therefore means you shouldn't have money in the first place. But at the same time, if you have money, you should be willing to give it up if the circumstances require.
Absolutely. Well, and and the idea behind, that God is against wealth. I mean, what do you do with Job?
Yeah.
I mean, Job was one of the wealthiest men in the world at that point. And when he lost it all, when the Lord, came to Satan and he's like, hey, have you thought about my good and righteous, son Job? Mm-hmm. And he loses all those in a matter of minutes. All of his material things, all of his children, they're all wiped off the face of the earth. And then, he's attacked with all these different things and everything. But then in the end, the Lord basically doubles what Job had. It's just not, it kind of flies in the face of, God does bless people. He blesses them in different ways. I mean, I know some people that are much, much wealthier than I am, that are good, godly people who take their money and they invest it in other people, and they invest it in things that make a difference, and they take the things in which they have made and in some ways use it for the kingdom of God.
And that ultimately should be what the goal is that money is not the goal. Money is the tool in which should be used to spread the gospel, which is the whole reason God allows it to exist in the first place.
100%.
And kind of getting to that, I kind of wrote this down. I had some we can kind of discuss them as kind of we wrap up here, is that some of the questions that I had, the approach someone could use to approach a Marxist worldview or a socialistic worldview from a Christ-centered manner, starting with, okay, what do you see as the problems or problems that society faces? And ultimately, we know the ultimate problem is sin.
Yes.
And mankind's rebellion against God. But in more of an applicational sense, somebody might say, well, there's wealth inequality, or there's political inequality, or whatever it is. But from that, people come up with their own suggestions or solutions to for these problems. And taking those first two, how would you use those and kind of expand upon those, talking to someone who might have a Marxist or a socialistic worldview?
I think that the biggest thing is that if you realize that, well, first, it depends on what you believe about the Lord.
Right.
I mean, the biggest problem, like we said, is not only sin, but it's lostness.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't know that you're lost, then you don't really know what the answer is.
Right.
And so as a society, we see, and listen, there's no perfect government. There's never going to be a perfect government. There's never going to be a perfect, democracy as a whole. But, the problems that we see that society faces is it's kind of like, well, everybody should be dealt the same hand. So we need to make sure we're redistributing everything in a manner where everybody is equal. Well, it simply doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not the way the world works.
Mm-hmm.
The solution, is number one, in a perfect world, everybody knows Christ.
Right.
And everybody wants people to not only know Christ, but they're willing to help each other meet each other's needs.
Right, but in a Christ-centered manner.
In a Christ-centered manner, yes.
And I guess with that, getting into question 3, kind of like why I would approach somebody with, why do you think or do you see that this is an appropriate solution? And again, it goes back to that worldview thing. It's all a, how you would say it, not a spiral or whatever, but more like it's more of just that chain.
Yes.
Thought process or applicational process of that worldview. And I think the most important question, and we've kind of danced around it, but this is kind of what it is. The ultimate thing between a Christian worldview and a Marxist worldview, and ultimately I think atheism kind of leads to a Marxist worldview, is ultimately what is the person's motivation? What is the reason that they're doing it, and what is their goal?
Sure.
And the important piece under that is, where is their heart at?
What is it? Where your heart is, and probably you would probably agree with me on this. It is not necessarily where our human heart should.
Right. Heart is in the.
Because if you follow your heart,
Mm-hmm.
you are in trouble.
Absolutely.
If you follow your emotions, you're in trouble.
I think what I was getting at is that it's the heart in the sense, okay, where is your soul?
Where is your motivation? Is it to give glory to the Lord, or is it to take it into your own type of way so that you can fix the problem?
That, or fulfill yourself.
Or fulfill yourself, or find peace for yourself and for other people. And without Christ, there is no peace.
Absolutely.
There is no peace.
Mm-hmm. And I guess kind of moving on to that, the final thing we'll kind of wrap up here with is, the other day was July 4th, 250th anniversary of our country. where people got to celebrate, have a good time. I saw some people from the UK that were still here for the World Cup. They were having a ball. They were in the parades. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. First time here, it's like hardly any of us get to be in the parades, but they're from the foreign country and they get to be in the parade for the first time. Besides the point, I guess So, what did your family do for July 4th?
It was great. You know, my wife and my youngest boy Alex, we went down to Myrtle Beach last week and we played putt-putt several times, and you know, we would make sandwiches at the house after we went to the beach, and then at night we would actually go somewhere to eat. We went to an arcade a couple of times. It was just amazing, and we came back on purpose to our own house to kind of celebrate the 4th and everything. And you know, we went and bought some fireworks and went outside and had a blast. You know. But I thought to myself, okay, so I was born in 1976, right? So 50 years ago was when we were celebrating 200 years. I was a baby, I don't remember it, okay? But I thought to myself as we celebrated, I thanked God, first of all, for having freedom in Him.
Absolutely.
Because that is ultimate freedom. But I did thank God many, many times for the fact that God has allowed me to be born into a country and where I can worship freely, and I can gather with my church family, or I could gather together with just some friends, or I could gather together with friends I went to school with.
Or be here at camp.
And I had this week to look forward to coming up to camp and being with a bunch of boys and being with the staff guys and that sort of thing. But that's how I celebrated. Like, I thought about it. I was like, you know what? I might. I don't know that I'll live to 100. So I don't know that I'll see another 50 years of if God continues to bless it for it to be a country, right? I don't think I'll ever get to celebrate that type of moment again. And I think the thing that I have grown to love, and people can disagree with me, and that's perfectly fine. The thing that I have grown to love about the United States is the diversity. Is the understanding that, you know, I mean, I can drive down the road and I can meet people who were born in a totally different country than I was. And, you know, I can enjoy their culture and I can enjoy their food and I can enjoy things like that because I look at it and I say, okay, because it used to be, you know, people will talk about, well, you got to go all the way. But you and I both know, you and I have served in places where, you know, there's a large group of people who are from totally different countries. You know, and
I think what's really cool about it, I mean, you've said it before here, you said it before at church, is that no longer do we have to go to the nations to minister to them. The nations are coming to us.
And I love it. To me, it's beautiful. To see people from all over the world. That, you know, it's not even really at this point about America. It's more the idea that God created so many different languages and so many different people and so many different, you know, cultures and things like that. But in the end, those that know Christ are going to be worshiping together.
I think that's what's really cool about it too, is that this is what gets me so mad oftentimes, is that when we hear the word diversity gets thrown around in such a wrong context, is that it's become such a divisive meaning that it gets completely misaligned from what it actually means. And people take it as a racial thing, as a cultural thing. When I think of diversity is in the sense that God has made people different for a specific reason, and put them in different places, in situations, in different cultures, ultimately all with the same goal of coming to know Him.
And to glorify Him in the end is the end result for people that come to know Jesus Christ. Realizing that we, as humans, are inadequate of saving ourselves. But the fact is that you and I have a gospel that is perfect in every way, and that we should want other people to know.
Right.
Plain and simple.
Well, I think that was a kind of a good discussion to talk about. Being here at camp, I think we're going to do some stuff this afternoon, have a good time. Kind of if we have a chance, maybe go around and talk to some of the staffers, some of the administrators here, and just kind of get their opinions on some of these things, kind of how they are here at camp. If we do, we'll include them here. In fact, you might be seeing some of them right now. But yeah, I think that's good for episode 3, and we'll see you guys next time. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I hope you did, Brian. I know I did. And we'll see you guys next time.